Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good vibes, good energy, good people. It's your boy Mickey Fenty, aka Mickey Made It. If you're new to this channel, you know what to do to this channel. Subscribe right now. Also, if you want to support my brand, it's inspiredbydreams.shop. Okay, what's up, you guys? Happy to be back. I know I missed my last live. Had a little mishap there. Have to take care of your health. You have to stay on top of the things you do. I'm going to get into that whole talk on my live show Friday, excuse me, at 9 a.m. But I would love to tell you guys that, when it comes down to your health and everything, you have to stay on top of it. And that's what I'm doing. Just too much sugar and mixed with my anxiety. I took it a little too far. But I'm healthy and I'm happy and I'm back for you guys. Couldn't wait to get back in here. Okay, so today's conversation surrounds white culture. Or if it is really a thing. A lot of people say there's no such thing as white culture, and others say there's a thing, white culture. So we're gonna break it all down, see what's going on, and see what comes out of this conversation. Love you guys, and thank you for your support, man. I'm back, feeling good, and my strength is up. I got a little electrolytes just in case, and we back. Let's get it.
Mickey made it. Mickey made what you made, Mickey?
Mickey made it.
Salute, Mickey. Grand rising to you.
Mickey made it. What's up, man? Salute.
Stop saying that white people don't have culture because it actually helps white supremacy.
So white culture exists, but it is not a culture as such. It's a power structure, an ideology. It's white supremacy, the will to power, the desire to be the universal subject, to be default, neutral, to be considered merely human without having to hyphenate or qualify. Now the problem is, occupying that neutral default position doesn't really lend itself to the sorts of idiosyncrasies and particularities that we associate with culture. Not only that, it leads you to the denial of that sort of specificity. Think of the way that transphobes like to claim that they don't have pronouns. Now, of course, white people have cultures. They have regional, national, linguistic communities that they belong to. But that is very different from saying that they have a white culture. And in fact, those individual cultures do a lot of work to undermine the idea of white culture and white supremacy. Because if you call yourself, for instance, an Irish American, you're weakening your claim to being only American. You've now joined the long list of people with hyphenated identities. And I would add one last point, something else that is missing from that general category of white culture, which is a claim to injury. So the sociologist Wendy Brown, in her book States of Injury, describes how identity categories tend to be formed in response to some sort of harm. A group of people is oppressed, they form a community in response, and then name themselves. And that series of acts, is the formation of a culture. But white culture has never had that experience. We share no common experience of oppression or victimization because of our race, which goes a long way to explaining why it is that we say something provocative like white culture doesn't exist, because it is a very different animal.
The idea that Europeans have culture, that European immigrants to the United States have culture, but that white Americans in the United States do not have culture is an example of how whiteness as an ideology has been foundational in the construction of our social reality. A culture is a system for living, a way of life that is shared by a group of people. And that can sound uncomfortably vague and open-ended, but that's a useful way for thinking about it because culture is very messy, very fluid, and difficult to pin down. Now, one of the things that you will hear on the internet from unfortunate people is the idea of white culture. Sometimes they'll call it Western culture, but it's basically the same thing. And the thing is, this does not exist. This is a racist talking point developed by people who are under the illusion that there is a common cultural system that unites all of the countries of Western Europe, that all of the legitimate members of that cultural system are white, and that those who are not white that reside in those territories are invaders or threats to that cultural system. Usually people bring this up when they are trying to ascribe a particular cultural product or an idea to white folks, and this is a fiction that is bought into by the kind of idiots that think that the fall of the Roman Empire was brought about by feminism. That being said, once we add specificity to this, we can then have a productive conversation. So whereas white culture doesn't exist, white American culture within the United States does, because now we're talking about a specific population and their way of navigating life. And white American culture is a point of convergence for a variety of socio-cultural, economic, and political forces that will shape every aspect of your life and inform things like how you worship a god, because it's assumed that you will and that it will only be one. How you relate to your government, how you express yourself, the language that you speak, how you speak that language, how you dress, how you spend your money on recreational activities, and what recreational activities are deemed appropriate for someone in your demographic. And the list goes on and on and on. And all of this creates a standard against which everyone is measured. And some people can meet that standard rather easily, and a lot of folks can't, including a lot of white folks who may be queer, disabled, or poor. And when you don't meet a standard, you have to adjust, which is why I go by Gabe or Gabriel instead of Gabriel, because white American English is the linguistic standard. And so the worst thing that we can do is pretend that white American culture doesn't exist. It absolutely does, and it has negatively affected all of us, including those who uphold it.
Well, the way you live isn't realistic. A lot of people can't live like this.
Please go watch her video, because she is talking about being an unmasked autistic and just simply asking the question. And to be completely honest with you, as somebody that has been on this app and has been talking about the detrimental effects of masking, I really only started masking once I got to corporate spaces that were predominantly white. And when you think about white culture and you think about the idea that you pull yourself up from your bootstraps and that you have to work for everything you have and that no one needs to help you with anything, that is not what it's like in places where people of color commune. We are always open with asking the questions. We're okay with saying that we don't know something. Like, that's just not there. And maybe this is an unpopular opinion, and hopefully I don't get canceled for saying this, but I think white autistics actually struggle in a lot of ways that I really just can't relate to unless I'm actually in a white space and I'm feeling the oppressive nature of the space. And for real, I feel bad for some of y'all. Like, I feel bad for you all that have had to grow up in environments where nobody gives a crap and everybody is just expecting you to be normal. And that idea of normal is really white supremacy. It's really act this way. Anywhere you go, think about it. If you're in a corporate space, the idea is that you act professional. What is professionalism rooted in? I'll wait. Whiteness. All right. When we talk about school, when we talk about these systems and how you move through these systems, most of the systems, specifically in America, are rooted in whiteness, in being this certain ideal and shell of who you really are. You are not supposed to talk about the things that make you human, the things that will address your needs, because that's looked down upon. But in communities of color, from my personal experience, I have been able to ask the questions and do all of those things. So I didn't even realize that I was just odd. I just got what I needed when I needed it until I got to a space where white supremacy went rampant. And for that reason, I think that sucks, specifically for my white autistic friends, because y'all have literally grown up to believe that y'all are just these like crappy people that are broken. And that's just really a product of white culture. And then I think, unfortunately, when we address that issue and we talk about white culture, I think sometimes people can take it personally because they don't realize that I'm not saying that you are messed up as a person because you're white, but I'm saying that white supremacy also affects you too in a negative way, and that's why you feel the way you feel, and that's why you're not able to be your true self, and why you have to mask all the time, because there's literally no community within your own community for you to be yourself.
So I've seen several POC TikTokers discuss white American culture, and I wanted to add my 2 cents. White Americans. The reason we don't have a culture is because when our ancestors came here, they gave theirs up because there was societal pressure to appear plain old white American. They weren't kidnapped from their communities. and they weren't beaten and enslaved. They weren't forcefully indoctrinated into another society, and they weren't isolated away from anyone who could help them keep their traditions. It wasn't widely illegal for them to practice their cultures. And yes, the harassment and discrimination that a lot of European immigrants faced upon coming here is awful, and I wish upon no one. However, it is very, very different from the personal and generational trauma we caused the Black and Indigenous communities by forcefully, violently stripping their culture away from them.
Why is it that white folks support anti-blackness, racism, and white supremacist culture in so many goddamn fucking ways? Why is it that we support it through our silence, our defensiveness, our denial, that code of silence? Let's not talk about it. Let's ignore it. All that fucking gymnastics, that defensiveness, the fucking anger, the passive aggressiveness, the stereotyping, the overt, covert racist, all the shit that we do, the gaslighting, all that fucking shit that we do as white people. Why can't we just leave black people the fuck alone? Why? Because we were taught that shit. It's our culture. White supremacist culture is American culture. It's European culture. We see ourselves as overseers. We ourselves as entitled to control and judge black people. White Americans wanted, back in the day, we demanded black people be segregated, right? So we segregated. Black people said, okay, great, we're going to make our own shit. They started doing great. What did we do? We fucking burned their communities down to the ground. And you gotta sit in your fucking silence? You ought to be ashamed of yourself for not giving a fuck. Every single one of you that can't talk about it, that spews fucking racist narratives, stereotypes, denial, gaslight. That's not their reality. Telling black people what the fuck they should think, feel, do, be. Fuck you. Do better. Reject your fucking training, your indoctrination. Question your own goddamn morality racially for once in your fucking life. I'm tired. I'm tired of what my people have done, what they continue to do. I'm fucking sick of it. I'm tired of seeing people suffer. I'm tired of the fucking inequality. And you ought to give a fuck too.
What's up, guys? So I think I finally cracked the code as to why white people in the United States think that white culture is a thing. And before you comment, I ask that you watch my video in its entirety. Now, if you're not from the United States or you don't have any knowledge about United States history, this may be a little bit difficult to grasp, but I'm going to explain it as easily as possible. So in short, I think that white people believe that they have culture in the United States similar to black people having culture in the United States because they think that because black people have this, white people must also have this. Now, that's one part of false equivalence between whiteness and blackness in the confines of the United States. And it's one part a misunderstanding of what black means in the United States and how it is interchangeable with African American. And while both of those points may seem separate of each other, they actually are one and the same. So now I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what I mean. The terms black and African American are typically used interchangeably in the United States in two facets of our life. So the first facet would be comprised of interpersonal usage and self-identification. Interpersonal being you are black / African American, and self-identification being I am black / African American. Now the second facet would be comprised of systemic usage and identification. And we can see this on job applications, school applications, the census, and etc. Now, despite them being used interchangeably in the United States, you wouldn't call a black person in Canada an African American. If we followed the same framework, they'd be a black Canadian. And this is true for anywhere else globally, because African American is an identity that is specific to the United States. So in retrospect, black is a race, but African American is an ethnicity that evolved from that race. Now, this evolution of African American from blackness was in response to chattel slavery, white supremacy, and the racial caste system. African Americans and our ancestors had culture and had ethnicity before the transatlantic slave trade. But during chattel slavery, the culture of our ancestors was literally beaten and forced out of them. And so in order to cope and communicate amongst each other, a new culture had to form. And this is where the culture and ethnicity of African American came from. And that's why when we talk about African American culture, it's very specific things like the civil rights movement or hip hop or African American vernacular English or specific hairstyles that are specific to Black culture or African American culture in the United States. Now, on the other hand, white is not being used interchangeably with another ethnicity in the United States, nor is there an ethnicity that evolved from whiteness in response to cultural genocide. Furthermore, majority of the white people in the United States can trace their lineage back to their mother country. Instead, many of them choose to assimilate into whiteness. And I would argue that whiteness or white culture, if there was one, it would be the absence of culture, the absence of an ethnicity. And I'll get into that point a little bit later. On the other hand, African American folks and people of the African diaspora in general do not always have this privilege because, again, our ancestors had their culture and their traditions beaten out of them. So again, whenever we're talking about Black culture, we're being very specific typically to African American culture. But because of the incredibly complicated history of African Americans, and because of the construction of race in general, Black and African American are typically used interchangeably in the US, which again is also why African American culture and Black culture are terms that are used interchangeably. Now, for sake of argument, let's say that I do concede, and white culture is a thing in the United States. And specifically, it's being used interchangeably with an ethnicity that evolved from it, and we're going to call it white American. And before I get any deeper into that, I want you to notice something. African American versus white American. Already there's an issue because African and African American comes from Africa, which is where people were stolen from. White and white American is just a race, and a race that's not specific to any continent. So we're already not really on equal footing, but I'll digress. Now, in creating this white American ethnicity or culture, I'm going to use the same framework that I used for African American culture. And the culture that would emerge from whiteness would be a culture of superiority. And we know this because whenever Blackness was threatened to be made equal to whiteness, whiteness responded with violence, and still does to this day. And the next issue is that this response didn't just happen in the United States. This happened on a global scale. And so we've already run into another issue because Black culture or African American culture is specific to the United States. But in conceding and constructing a white culture for you, it is not something specific to the United States because this is something that has happened globally. And so now I have a few questions for you. And understanding that this is what white culture would be if it operated under the same framework as African American or Black culture, why would you want this culture to exist? Why do you fight for its existence? Why not trace your lineage back and get in touch with your ethnicity? And so there are two answers for that. One, you think that just because Black people have it, white people must have it, and you see it as like a disservice to white folks if you don't get it as well, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because African American culture came after our ancestors were literally stripped of their original cultures. Or you understand that if you don't give up your ethnicity and you don't assimilate into whiteness, the control that whiteness has is no longer yours to wield. But anyways, that was my critical analysis for the day. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree or disagree. And thank you for watching.
Thing makes a white person feel uncomfortable. Right. Everybody shushes it up.
Right. Go watch that stitch. This goes back to epigenetics and generational trauma. Black bodies have been the punching bag mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually for generations upon generations, and that is engraved in our DNA. It is engraved in our DNA that we are the receivers of those negative emotions and trauma, and that white people are the senders of that. Because when you have a uncomfortable emotional experience or you experience something traumatic, if you do not sit with that, process it, and transmute it, it either gets stuck in your body, stuck in your DNA, or it has to go somewhere and it's going to black bodies. So what she's talking about when people are talking about racism and it makes white people uncomfortable and they change the subject, it's because the white collective does not have the capability or the ability to sit in the discomfort of their emotions that slavery brings on. And so because they can't sit with it, where does it go? It goes to us. And so not just a conversation that you may be having with some about racism, but when I think about the reasoning for not wanting to teach critical race theory and, not wanting to have certain things come to light, yes, I agree it is about erasing our history, but on a mental and emotional level, we know what the political agenda is, right? We know what that is already. We know what they're trying to do. But on a mental and emotional level, I really think the white collective is unable, again, to sit with the discomfort, the shame, the guilt, the accountability of how they have treated black people. Because a white person could find out right now that their great-great-grandfather was a slave owner, and they can easily just say, oh, well, I'm not like that. That was them, and it's different now, and whatever else. But do they have the emotional intelligence to sit and process what is in their bloodline, take full accountability for their unconscious thoughts and behaviors that they may have towards minorities, specifically black people, African Americans, sit with those emotions, process them, and transmute them? Collectively, white people are not doing that, which is why we see Karens, which is why we still see racism. They can't do it.
I saw a play today and it reminded me that white people used to know how to dance. We used to have like a little bit of culture to us. Like, how come we don't go to the club and tap anymore? You don't see us waltzing around anymore. Like, there's no... What happened to that? Well...
White people are the laziest exploiters in history, and the receipts are endless. White people love to posture as the architects of civilization, the hardest working people to ever grace the earth. But the historical record says otherwise. They have never built anything without forcing other people to do the labor. From the plantations of the Americas to the factories of the Industrial Revolution, from colonial conquests to modern corporate exploitation, the white ruling classes have perfected the art of avoiding real work while reaping the rewards of stolen labor. They enslaved millions rather than farming their own land. They looted entire continents rather than develop their own resources. They forced children into dangerous factories while sitting in boardrooms. They built entire economic systems around wage theft and inherited wealth. And today they still live off the spoils of past and present exploitation while calling everyone else lazy. The backbone of white economic dominance wasn't ingenuity or effort. It was forced labor on a global scale. The transatlantic slave trade was born because white landowners refused to till their own soil. European empires enslaved millions rather than build self-sufficient societies. Plantation owners in the US and Caribbean sat in mansions while enslaved Africans worked from dawn to dusk. After abolition, they created sharecropping, tenant farming, and debt peonage to keep non-white people working for free. Translation: white people never built their own economies. They just stole bodies to do it for them. If they were really the world's hardest workers, why did they need millions of enslaved people to do all the labor? It wasn't just labor they avoided. They refused to even create the conditions for labor. They stole land from indigenous peoples rather than develop their own agricultural systems. They plundered Africa, India, and Southeast Asia for raw materials instead of just producing their own. They extracted wealth from colonies while leaving the native people in poverty. They still live off stolen land and resources to this day, while pretending like their wealth comes from hard work. White civilization isn't built on innovation or industriousness. It's built on wholesale theft, followed by smug self-congratulation. When forced labor became less convenient, white elites turned to a whole new class of unpaid workers. their own children. Factories in 19th century England forced children as young as 5 into 16-hour shifts. Coal mines sent white children through tunnels while their fathers drank in pubs. U.S. textile mills worked children to the bone because paying adults was too expensive. White elites lounged in drawing rooms while their own children hacked up soot in mills. If they were such hard workers, why did they need to enslave children to keep their industries running? Slavery and child labor wasn't enough. White business owners then created an entire economic system to keep avoiding work. They paid starvation wages while raking in profits. They passed anti-union laws so workers could not demand fair pay. They relied on immigrant labor, such as Chinese, Mexican, and Caribbean, instead of working hard themselves. They offshored modern labor to the global south, while sitting in air-conditioned offices. And the scam continued.
Okay, I mean, I've been around the world and I've never heard a white person speak on culture, but maybe it's just me. I don't know. I believe that everybody has a different type of way of, explaining what culture is. But I know I have a lot of white friends just as well as black friends, and I've never heard that conversation come up in the numerous conversations I've been in with in so many different places. You guys let me know what you think on this conversation, and love you guys, and I'll see you soon. Friday live 9 a.m. I need you all to tune in. It's very important. And until next time, it's your boy Mickey Fenty, aka Mickey Made It. If you're new to this channel, you know what to do to this channel. Subscribe.